Ugh. So this is definitely how I've been feeling lately, and considering the DMs I've been getting, a lot of people, right? So if you saw my story earlier, I was talking about how I've been going through some emotional triggers, right? That dark night of the soul kind of shadow work that comes up. So I wanted to talk about kind of like what this is, what it feels like. We have a lot of these words that go around where it's like emotional thought processes, the shadow self, all this kind of stuff. So I kind of want to break it down in more of a real world sense because everybody goes through this. So a lot of times we think of emotional trauma or traumas or depression or anxiety as something that has to be very intense in order for you to have emotional trauma, right? So we kind of downplay things that we go through, when in fact, a lot of people, pretty much everybody experiences this, right? So emotional trauma is defined as something that overwhelms the brain, where you feel out of control, and so the brain feels overwhelmed. You feel overwhelmed and you can't process that. So what happens in the brain when this goes on is that every time we have an experience, right, it's like, woo, right now I'm making a memory of an experience, right? This is pretty chill, so it's easy for my brain to process. So your brain intakes stimuli and then it sends it towards like the hippocampus, which regulates, the limbic system, which is part of our emotions. And then it processes it as something that's like, oh, this is pretty neutral, also fun. Like, yay, I'm going to put this and store it here. And so when you recall it, it's pretty easy to understand how you felt and what happened and, how it relates to you moving forward. But when we go through an emotionally traumatic time, a time where we feel overwhelmed, the brain kind of like shuts down those areas and can't process, because what happens is that our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight, also freeze, which I will talk about in a little bit, our fight or flight system goes into overdrive and it shuts down the different parts of the brain that help with processing emotion and processing memory. And so these experiences will kind of like stay within us for a long time, and we don't really understand how to process them, how to integrate them, and how to move forward. So they still feel very real. So something that will go down, I'm just gonna sit down for a second. Something that will go down with this is that throughout our life, after we experience these, emotional traumas, these times where we feel overwhelmed, we can have triggers that come back in our life. And so this is kind of like what I've been experiencing. And the thing is that, yes, when this comes up, it fucking sucks, okay? But the second thing is that we have the opportunity then to actually allow our brain and allow our body to process these emotions, okay? Process these memories and attune it to our now reality and kind of like take steps forward. So I want to talk about what this feels like. So going back to the fight, flight, or freeze, okay? When we get emotionally overwhelmed, we either want to, fight it, right? We want to flight, right? We want to run away, like, get me the fuck out of here. Or we freeze, like, fuck, I don't know what to do, right? And so in all of these times, our mind kind of like can go blank, especially in the freeze part. And so that's what can happen to me as well. I'm usually, I kind of like freeze up and then I like run away, right? So what's happening here is that you experience a trigger. Like, so for me, when I was younger, I had very, very, very strict parents, right? And they were also really young. And so they were growing up as they were raising me, but I was a child, so I didn't understand that, right? So I experienced a lot of things where I felt very out of control, right? Just kind of like moved around, but then also like I didn't have like control over like my independence a lot, things like this. And so I experienced recently, something that was similar that came into my environment that made me feel kind of like definitely out of control of my own stability. But the thing is that I didn't really recognize it as that, right? And so, you know, I'm up in Laurel Canyon hanging out with my friend, hi Camille, and we had just a couple of situations, you know, go down. Wasn't anything too big, right? But it triggered me. And all of a sudden I started feeling this like quiet anxiety come up, where it wasn't like I'm hyperventilating or I'm overwhelmed, but it was something where it was like, okay, I really don't feel good. Okay, I don't want to be here right now. I don't want to be here right now. I feel like I need to leave. I feel like I need to leave, right? And even though Camille's like, oh, like what's going on? Like, you know, like talk to me. I was like, I don't know. I just feel like I've just got to go. I've got to take care of other stuff. Like, you know, I couldn't really articulate, right? And so use this as a metaphor for noticing when triggers come up in your life. Another thing that will happen is that you'll kind of feel like there's this black mist that comes over your perspective, this kind of like cloudiness where even though you have amazing things that you're still doing in your life, that you have on the horizon, that you're working on, you logically know that, but you can't connect with them or embody them. You can't really understand that, right? Because this anxiety, this emotional trauma has been triggered again and is kind of like having you, it's disassociating you from your current reality. So how do we deal with this when it comes up? Now that we know how to identify it, how do we deal with it when it comes up? The first thing that you want to do is to ask yourself, okay, what do I really have to take care of right now? What do I really need to do? We're going to take a cue from the body and the brain. When you go into that fight or flight mode, the brain shuts down and the body shuts down all of the different things that you don't necessarily need in order to survive. So, you know, those texts that are coming in from friends that are just like, hey, what are you doing later? Or, you know, different things where it's like, oh, you're going to go to dinner or something like that. Just let that stuff go. You know, if you can, send a little text and be like, hey, not feeling too good, gonna have to reschedule, right? So first off, move stuff out of the way that you really don't have to do right now. The second thing you want to do is to just take a little bit of time and kind of settle back down into yourself. Ways I like to do this is to maybe stretch a little bit, you know, something really simple so you can kind of get the blood moving again. You can work out if you can. Sometimes when this happens right away, I can't meditate, and that's okay, you know, but maybe take a second, take a couple deep diaphragmatic breaths into the body, and to kind of like allow yourself to understand, okay, what can I do right now to make myself feel just a little bit better? And that's kind of what those breaths will do, or what that stretching will do. It will give you that little twinkling, that little idea of like, okay, what can I do next to make myself a little bit better? Because this is where you really get down into your intuition, okay? The second thing that you do like during this time is to allow yourself to get emotionally and mentally vulnerable with friends, okay? So even though I couldn't particularly articulate right away to Camille how I was feeling, when I took some time a little later after I kind of like settled down and utilized different, you know, like things that I can have like stretching and stuff to comfort me, okay, then I called her or I texted her and I was like, hey, thanks for trying to help me. You know, this is kind of like what was happening and this is kind of how I feel, right? And I also talked to not just Camille, but a couple of other friends as well. And doing that, it took all of these like ping pong balls that were inside of my head where I couldn't really understand what was going on or why I felt that way before. And it took them out of my head and placed them right in front of me, right? So because our friends are on a similar vibe as us, right? You vibe together, which means you're on a similar vibration. They're probably also experiencing some sort of dynamic that's similar to what you're experiencing, but in a different way. So after that, also do things to nourish your inner child, okay? So that's doing something like, you know, making simple meals that you used to have when you were a kid, attuning it to your diet now, you know, doing things that feel comforting for you. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions on this. It's just like a little preview of what you can do, and let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this. Talk to you later.